Let's talk a little bit about taxes. I have wild video of a Republican congressman on CNBC being asked, how will Republicans pay if the decision is made to extend the Trump tax cuts? Now, let me kind of give you an overview of what's going on before we get to the video. In 2017, Donald Trump's tax plan included provisions that if you do nothing, expire in 2015. This includes reversing the top tax rate back up 2 and a fraction points, 2.6 points, something like that. It includes what happens with the SALT tax, which I'll explain, the SALT deduction rather, and a bunch of other things. If Kamala Harris were to become president, presumably some of the things Trump did would be allowed to expire. If Donald Trump becomes president, presumably he would try to extend some of those things, but maybe not, because Trump has been talking about changing the SALT deduction, even though he's the one who changed it to begin with. And at the same time, it depends on what support he has in the House and Senate and who holds a majority there. So needless to say, the November election in the House and Senate is particularly meaningful, even just in the universe of what happens with our taxes. But that gets us to this interview on CNBC with Republican Congressman Jason Smith. And he was asked, how would Republicans pay if you extend the Trump tax cuts? The Trump tax cuts reduce revenue. That needs to somehow be made up for if you want to stick to your own stated priority of balancing the budget. How do you do it? He doesn't know. Let's listen to what he has to say, and then we're going to delve into it in more detail.
In taxes.
But how would you pay for extending the tax cuts and getting rid of the SALT cap?
We're going to have to look at everything. I think whenever you're looking
That's a big number, though. Is it not? What would the number be?
So first of all, how will you pay for it? We will look at everything. Okay, that's not really an answer.
If you got rid of the SALT cap and you extended the tax cuts, it's trillions of dollars, isn't it, over 10 years?
It's about $900 billion over 10 years is the SALT cap elimination. You're looking at $4.6 trillion worth of unpaid for tax expirations that we have to address. So we have to look at everything. Everything is on the table.
You think tariffs can pay for that? Are you?
I think we're going to have to look at absolutely everything. There's not one thing that can pay for $4.6 trillion.
Like what, though? Do Republicans aren't willing to raise taxes anywhere?
Well, I think there's hundreds of billions of dollars out there that the administration has tried to use for student loans. I also believe if you codify various aspects of the 301 tariffs, that can raise a lot of money in the hundreds of billions of dollars. There's multiple things to look at. I also believe there's some deductions that we should be getting rid of that are out there that are not necessary. We need a flatter, fairer rate.
Okay, so what kind of deductions do we get rid of?
Well, for one, SALT is going to be in the middle of the road. The president's called for us to address SALT. There'll be a cap.
I really need you to understand that Trump is now talking about doing something with SALT. He's the one who dealt with SALT to begin with in his tax plan. He now wants to reverse it to fix the very problem he created. So let me remind you what the deal is with this. SALT stands for state and local taxes. It used to be the case that all of the state and local taxes that you paid, you could deduct federally. And therefore, you would not pay federal tax on state and local taxes. They become a deduction. The Trump tax cuts put a cap of $10,000 on that. And the people that really suffered as a result are those living in higher tax states, typically blue states that have much better infrastructure and education and all of those things that kind of matter. Trump now is saying, well, we're going to get rid of the SALT cap, but he's acting like he's solving a problem someone else created. He's the one who put the SALT cap on to begin with. But then now you have this Republican congressman saying, well, we're going to put a cap on SALT to solve what? The problem from removing it, which you did to begin with? It doesn't make any sense.
On SALT. It's not going to be unlimited. There will be a cap on SALT because there is no way in a Republican House of Representatives that you can pass an unlimited SALT deduction.
So what kind of number do you think that'll be?
A higher cap or a lower cap than where it is now?
I would say definitely a higher cap. There's going to have to be some wiggle room. If you look at the SALT cap that was passed in 2017, it had a marriage penalty. Republicans are supposed to be the party of families.
All right. So listen, the bottom line here is they have no idea. They are the party that argues we want to trim the deficit and start paying off the debt. Trump promised in a 4-year term, his first 4-year term, we would have no more national debt. Obviously, none of us believed it, just like we didn't believe Mexico would pay to build a wall, just like we didn't believe Jared Kushner would solve the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. We didn't believe it. But they are simultaneously saying we are going to pass tax law that increases the deficit. We care about reducing the deficit, and yet we have no idea how we're going to do it. Now, if any of these people wanted to be taken seriously, they would look at the known. It's not he talks about everything is on the table. Well, the government getting in the business of running a circus to pay down the debt. Obviously, it's not anything is on the table. You can do spending cuts. You can borrow deficit spending, which they say they're against. You can generate economic growth with your tax cuts, which although Trump said his tax cuts would generate economic growth, they actually did not. You can raise a different tax, right? You lower the income tax, you raise some other tax, or you eliminate the SALT cap, but then you got to find some new revenue, right? That's another possibility. You close loopholes, and they love saying that, but they never close the really big loopholes that allow Warren Buffett to pay a lower tax rate than his secretary. Or you privatize elements of government. You sell off assets or services and say, we're taking, this is deficit negative. We're going to take it off the books. We'll give it to some private company, run it at a profit, and we can sort of on paper eliminate the deficit associated with it, even though it will have huge social costs. Those are the ways that you can cover a shortfall. Republicans are morally opposed to some of them. Tax spending cuts they want to do, but of course they want to do it in a crazy way. They want to close the Department of Education. We don't need the Department of Energy. We don't, depending on who you ask, trim the IRS 95%. So the real answer here is our plan is the same as it has always been. We're going to give tax cuts to the rich and to corporations. We are going to cry about the deficit and big spending Democrats while we blow up the deficit and then blame either the person who came before us or the person who came after us. That's actually the plan. And I would appreciate it if he just told us that that was the plan instead of acting like they actually care about even having a plan. They don't.